Aryan Kumar was studying to become a Buddhist monk but fell in love with Sari Mahindra, the simple and beautiful young woman who came to the temple every day to pray. What if a single moment could change the course of a life dedicated to solitude and devotion? Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. In the heart of Indonesia, where the lush greenery met the azure sky, stood a serene Buddhist temple, its ancient stones whispering stories of devotion and solitude. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the distant sound of flowing water, creating an atmosphere that invited reflection and peace. Aryan, a young man clad in simple saffron robes, knelt on the cool stone floor of the temple, his posture straight, hands resting gently on his knees. His eyes were closed, and his mind was a canvas of thoughts, each one vying for attention as he attempted to immerse himself in the stillness of meditation. Around him, nature thrummed softly, the rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds weaving a melodic backdrop to his introspection. The gentle breeze caressed his skin, and for a moment, he felt a profound connection to the world around him. Yet, beneath this calm exterior, his heart was tumultuous, battling the weight of his choices and aspirations. Aryan had devoted himself to the monastic life, seeking enlightenment and spiritual fulfillment through the teachings of the Buddha. The path was clear, yet he often found himself questioning the depth of his commitment. Was it a true calling, or merely a refuge from the chaos of the world outside? As he sank deeper into his thoughts, images of his life before the temple flickered through his mind. Memories of laughter, friendships, and fleeting moments of joy clashed with the solemnity of his current existence. He recalled the fierce determination that had driven him to don the robes and embrace a life of meditation and service. Yet, there was an ache in his heart, a longing for something he could not quite name. The weight of his vows pressed upon him, yet the allure of the outside world beckoned like a distant song. Suddenly, a soft rustling broke his concentration. Aryan opened his eyes, drawn to the entrance of the temple. A figure stood silhouetted against the bright light of the afternoon sun, casting a warm glow that illuminated the space around her. It was Sari, a woman who had become a familiar presence in the temple. With her gentle demeanor and heartfelt devotion, she often came to pray, her spirit radiating a warmth that seemed to envelop the sacred space. Aryan watched her as she stepped inside, her simplicity contrasting beautifully with the intricate carvings of the temple. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back, and her delicate features exuded an unassuming grace that captured his attention. As Sari moved gracefully through the temple, her bare feet whispering against the stone, Aryan felt an inexplicable pull towards her. There was something about her sincerity, the way she bowed her head in prayer and lit the incense as if offering a piece of her soul to the divine, that stirred something deep within him. He observed her, mesmerized, as she closed her eyes, lost in her own moment of devotion. The world around them faded, leaving only the soft flicker of incense smoke curling upward and the sacred silence that enveloped them both. In that moment, Aryan felt a stirring in his heart, a sensation that was both exhilarating and terrifying. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, a blend of admiration and yearning that ignited a fire within him. He was painfully aware of the conflict brewing inside. How could he, a devoted aspiring monk, entertain such emotions? Wasn't he meant to renounce attachment, to seek liberation from the very desires that seemed to bind him? Yet, as he watched Sari's serene face, he felt the barriers of his heart begin to crumble. Time seemed to stretch as Aryan remained in his place, captivated by Sari's presence. He admired the way her lips moved silently in prayer, her brow furrowed in a gentle concentration that spoke of her deep faith. The temple, filled with the scent of incense and the echo of distant prayers, felt alive with energy, a sacred space where two souls converged, albeit unknowingly. As Sari finished her prayers, she turned slightly, catching Aryan's gaze for a fleeting moment. Their eyes met, and in that instant, a spark ignited between them, an unspoken connection that transcended the barriers of their worlds. But just as quickly as it had begun, the moment slipped away. Sari turned her attention back to the altar, placing her hands together in a gesture of gratitude before she prepared to leave. Arian felt a pang of longing wash over him, a desperate wish to reach out, to bridge the gap that had suddenly widened between them. He was torn, wrestling with the realization of his feelings and the knowledge that they could not blossom in the sacred confines of the temple. As Sari exited, Arian's heart felt heavy with unacknowledged emotions. He knelt down once more, attempting to return to his meditation, but the tranquility he had sought was now elusive. Instead, he found himself grappling with a whirlwind of thoughts. He questioned the very foundation of his commitment to the monastic life, wondering if he was meant to embrace the world outside the temple walls instead. The allure of love, as innocent and pure as it seemed, stood in stark contrast to the vows he had taken. His mind raced with possibilities and fears. What would it mean to pursue this feeling? Could he truly reconcile his growing affection for Sari with his spiritual aspirations? The conflict within him was palpable. It echoed in the silence of the temple, reverberating off the ancient stones that had witnessed countless prayers and confessions throughout the years. Arian felt a deep sense of frustration and confusion, a chasm of uncertainty that seemed to widen with each passing moment. In the days that followed, Arian found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on his studies and meditation. The image of Sari lingered in his mind like a haunting melody, a sweet reminder of the warmth he had felt in her presence. He watched her from afar during her visits to the temple, each interaction filled with unspoken words and shared glances that ignited a spark of hope and fear within him. Each time she lit the incense or knelt in prayer, Arian felt a profound sense of admiration mixed with a longing that threatened to consume him. As his inner conflict deepened, Arian began to seek solace in the teachings of the Buddha, hoping to find clarity in the midst of his turmoil. He spent long hours in meditation, attempting to silence the chaos within and focus on his path. Yet, the more he tried to distance himself from his feelings, the more they seemed to grow. He realized that love, in its purest form, could not be so easily dismissed or discarded. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the temple grounds, Arian found himself standing at the edge of the sacred pond, lost in thought. The water reflected the vibrant colors of the sunset, mirroring the tumult of emotions swirling within him. He gazed at his own reflection, searching for answers in the depths of his soul, but all he found was a young man torn between duty and desire, longing and renunciation. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, and Arian felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He knew he had to confront his feelings, to either embrace the love that had blossomed in his heart or to recommit himself fully to the life he had chosen. In that moment of introspection, he made a silent vow to seek the truth, to explore the depths of his emotions and understand the impact they would have on his journey toward enlightenment. Little did he know, the answers he sought would come from a place he had never anticipated. The sun began to rise over the temple, casting a warm golden light that filtered through the trees, illuminating the tranquil grounds. Arian, still dressed in his simple robes, felt an inexplicable pull towards the temple once more. The previous day had left an indelible mark on his heart, and he found himself yearning to see Sari again. As he walked along the familiar path lined with lush greenery, his thoughts danced between the serene teachings of his studies and the fluttering emotions ignited by her presence. Upon arriving at the temple, Arian noticed the elderly monk, Master Jaya, tending to the garden. The old man's hands moved with grace, nurturing the blossoming flowers that surrounded the sacred space. Arian felt a sense of duty wash over him, compelling him to lend a hand. As he approached, the aroma of earth and freshly watered plants enveloped him, momentarily grounding him in the present. However, even as he knelt beside Master Jaya, pulling weeds and caring for the delicate petals, his mind drifted back to Sari. Her gentle smile and the way she lit the incense lingered in his thoughts, distracting him from the task at hand. With each weed he pulled, he found himself wondering about her life, her dreams, and the prayers she whispered in the temple. The morning sun warmed his skin, but his heart felt a chill from the conflict brewing within him. He was supposed to be devoted solely to his spiritual journey, yet here he was, lost in the reverie of a woman who seemed to embody everything beautiful and pure. Master Jaya, sensing Arian's distraction, occasionally glanced over, his wise eyes filled with understanding that Arian was grappling with something far beyond the mundane chores. After what felt like an eternity, Arian's longing was finally rewarded when he caught sight of Sari entering the temple. Her presence was like a ray of sunshine breaking through the clouds, and all thoughts of duty slipped away as he watched her approach the sacred altar. She moved with a graceful elegance, her long hair cascading down her back, catching the light as she walked. Arian's heart raced, pounding against his chest as he observed her lighting the incense with reverence. The delicate tendrils of smoke curled upwards, carrying her prayers to the heavens, and Arian felt an overwhelming urge to join her, to share in that sacred moment. As Sari knelt in prayer, Arian's heart swelled with admiration. He marveled at her sincerity, the way she closed her eyes and surrendered herself to the divine. Her devotion reminded him of the very essence of his own commitment to the monastic life. Yet, the realization struck him hard. How could he reconcile his feelings for her with the dedication he had pledged to his spiritual path? He felt a pang of guilt, knowing that these feelings were pulling him away from the very ideals he sought to embody. The minutes stretched on, and as Sari finished her prayer, her eyes opened, and for a fleeting moment, their gazes locked. Arian felt a rush of warmth flood through him, a connection that transcended the space between them. Without thinking, he stepped closer, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. He had made the decision to speak to her, to let her know how deeply she had affected him. However, as he approached, the words became tangled in his throat, and he hesitated, feeling the weight of his spiritual vows pressing down upon him like a heavy stone. In that moment of uncertainty, Sari turned to leave, her graceful figure retreating into the temple's shadows. Arian's heart sank, a sense of urgency igniting within him. It was now or never. He had to overcome his hesitation and express what he felt. With a deep breath, he gathered his courage and called out to her. But the words died on his lips as he watched her walk away, feeling the distance between them grow. As Sari disappeared from view, Arian felt the full force of his inner turmoil crash over him like a tidal wave. He stood there, rooted to the spot, grappling with the realization that he was hopelessly in love with her. The conflict within him raged like a storm, tossing him between the shore of his spiritual aspirations and the alluring waves of his heart's desires. Torn between two worlds, he pondered the nature of love and duty, questioning whether he could truly embrace one without sacrificing the other. In the days that followed, Arian found himself ensnared in a web of contemplation. He spent hours in meditation, seeking clarity, but the more he tried to focus, the more Sari's image invaded his thoughts. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw her smile, heard the gentle rustle of her robes as she moved, and felt the warmth of her presence enveloping him. It was as if she had woven herself into the very fabric of his being, and he was powerless to untangle those threads. His routine at the temple became a blur of chores and rituals, each task overshadowed by the desire to see Sari again. He helped Master Jaya with the daily chores, but his heart was elsewhere, lingering on the moments they had shared. The temple, once a sanctuary of peace, now felt like a cage, trapping him in a cycle of longing and confusion. He would often find himself glancing at the entrance, hoping to catch sight of her silhouette against the backdrop of the sunlit sky. Finally, the day arrived when Sari returned to the temple once more. Arian felt a rush of exhilaration and dread intertwining within him. As she entered, the world around him faded into the background, and all that mattered was the radiant figure before him. There was an undeniable chemistry in the air, a current that sparked as they locked eyes once again. This time, Arian felt a surge of determination. He could no longer remain a passive observer in this unfolding story. He had to speak to her, to reach out and bridge the chasm between them. Taking a deep breath, Arian gathered his courage and approached her. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing upon him, and as he drew closer, he marveled at the beauty of her spirit. They exchanged pleasantries, and Arian felt a warmth envelop them, as if the universe itself conspired to bring them together. Their conversation flowed naturally, touching upon faith and life's complexities, and Arian's heart raced with each shared word. In that fleeting exchange, he felt a connection deepen, a bond that transcended the superficiality of casual encounters. They spoke of their hopes, dreams, and the struggles they faced in their respective paths. Arian found himself captivated by her insights, her laughter, and the way she viewed the world with such clarity and kindness. Every glance, every smile, drew him closer to a realization he could no longer ignore. His feelings for Sari were profound and genuine. But as their brief moment drew to a close, Arian felt a wave of sorrow wash over him. He watched as Sari turned to leave, her figure silhouetted against the fading light of the day. The contrast between his burgeoning love and the reality of his vows felt like a heavy weight on his heart. As she walked away, Arian stood rooted in place, a sense of longing gnawing at him. He realized that love was a powerful force, one that could either uplift or shatter, depending on the choices he made. In that moment, Arian knew he had reached a crossroads. He could continue to suppress his feelings, burying them beneath the weight of duty, or he could embrace the truth of his heart, no matter the consequences. As Sari disappeared from view, Arian felt the stirrings of determination rise within him. He was not just a monk. He was also a man capable of love, and it was time to confront that truth. As the weeks slipped by, Arian found himself increasingly drawn into the delicate web of his emotions. The temple, once a sanctuary of solitude and devotion, transformed into a vibrant backdrop for his burgeoning feelings for Sari. Each day, he woke with the sun, feeling the warmth of the golden rays brush against his skin, a gentle reminder of the light she brought into his life. The air was fragrant with incense and blooming frangipani, infusing the atmosphere with a sense of peace that now felt tinged with anticipation. Their encounters became a rhythm of their own, a dance choreographed by the universe. Arian observed Sari as she entered the temple, her movements imbued with grace and an effortless elegance. She would often kneel before the statue of the Buddha, her head bowed in prayer, the flickering candlelight illuminating her serene face. Arian found solace in these moments, stealing glances that spoke volumes more than words ever could. Each shared smile, each fleeting touch of their hands as they passed offerings, sent ripples through him, igniting a fire that both thrilled and terrified him. As they shared laughter in the sun-dappled courtyard, Arian felt the weight of his responsibilities as a monk clash with the lightness of his burgeoning affection. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, ranging from their views on life and spirituality to the simple joys of nature. Sari spoke of her dreams, the aspirations that danced in her eyes like fireflies in the night, and Arian listened intently, captivated not only by her words, but by the passion that radiated from her very being. He realized that he was no longer just a monk in training. He was a man in love, caught between two worlds that seemed irreconcilable. Amidst this blossoming connection, Arian's heart wrestled with an inner conflict. He sought counsel from one of the older monks, a wise man with a gentle demeanor who had seen countless young men grapple with their desires. The monk listened patiently as Arian poured out his heart, confessing the turmoil that had taken root within him. The wise elder, his eyes reflecting a depth of understanding, offered a perspective that resonated deeply within Arian. He spoke of love as a powerful force, one that could coexist with spiritual aspirations, but he cautioned Arian about the challenges that lay ahead. Love is a path that requires courage. The monk's voice echoed in Arian's mind long after their conversation ended. It can lead to profound happiness, but it may also bring heartache. You must be prepared for both, my son. These words lingered in Arian's thoughts, serving as both a comfort and a reminder of the precarious nature of his situation. As days turned into weeks, Arian increasingly found himself at a crossroads, where the serenity of monastic life collided with the vibrant chaos of his heart. He observed Sari from afar, noting the way her laughter filled the air, a melody that resonated in his very soul. Yet, amidst the joy, he felt a gnawing sense of guilt. The more he allowed himself to feel, the more he feared straying from his sacred path. In the stillness of night, when the world fell silent, Arian often turned to meditation, seeking clarity. He would sit cross-legged in his small room, the soft glow of a single candle flickering in the darkness, casting shadows that danced on the walls. His mind would wander to Sari's smile, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke of her hopes and dreams. He tried to focus on his breathing, to ground himself in the teachings he had embraced for so long. But the memory of her presence was intoxicating, a sweet poison that clouded his thoughts. The impending meditation retreat loomed on the horizon, a significant event that would test the resolve of all monks preparing to deepen their practice. Arian felt a sense of urgency building within him, a need to confront his feelings for Sari before he immersed himself in the retreat. It was a time meant for introspection and spiritual growth, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he might lose the opportunity to clarify his heart if he didn't act soon. As the sun sank beneath the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Arian stood on the temple steps, gazing out at the lush landscape that surrounded him. The tranquil beauty of the rice paddies and distant mountains served as a reminder of the peace he sought in his life. Yet, in that moment, Arian understood that true peace was not merely an absence of conflict, but rather a harmonious balance of love and duty. He knew he had to face his emotions head-on. There could be no more hiding or pretending. With each passing day, the weight of his feelings pressed heavily on him, a burden he could no longer carry in silence. The thought of Sari haunted him, her laughter echoing in his mind like a cherished song. It was a bittersweet melody, one that brought both joy and sorrow. He envisioned her smile, the way the sunlight would catch her hair, creating a halo around her head as she prayed. In those moments, he understood that love was not a distraction from his spiritual path. It was a part of it, a lesson in compassion and understanding. As the time for the meditation retreat drew closer, Arian felt an urgency to seek clarity. He could no longer allow himself to be swept away by doubt and fear. He needed to confront Sari, to express the feelings that had grown like a wildflower in his heart. The thought of confessing his love filled him with both excitement and dread, but he knew it was a necessary step. He could not enter the retreat without first acknowledging the truth of his heart. That evening, Arian found himself on the temple grounds, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and the sound of distant cicadas. The world around him felt alive, vibrant with possibility. He wandered through the lush gardens, each step resonating with a sense of purpose. The path was illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns, guiding him toward the place where he often encountered Sari. As he approached the temple entrance, his heart raced, a drumbeat echoing in his chest. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, trying to quell the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. The temple was quiet, a sanctuary of peace, yet it felt electric with anticipation. Arian could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, and he steeled himself for what was to come. He stood there for a moment, gathering his thoughts, allowing the tranquility of the temple to wash over him. He would speak to Sari, not just as a monk, but as a man who had found something extraordinary in her presence. He would lay bare his heart, revealing the depth of his feelings, no matter the outcome. With a newfound resolve, Arian stepped forward, ready to embrace the uncertainty that lay ahead. In the serene surroundings of the temple, the air was thick with an oppressive silence that enveloped Arian as he sat cross-legged on his meditation mat. The gentle rustle of leaves and the distant sound of a flowing stream were but faint echoes in his mind, drowned out by the cacophony of emotions swirling within him. He had entered the retreat with a heart full of hope and dedication, intending to deepen his practice and commitment to the monastic life he had chosen. Yet, here he was, battling the relentless tide of thoughts that spiraled back to Sari, the woman who had ignited a fire within him that he had never known existed. As the hours of meditation dragged on, Arian found it increasingly difficult to focus. Each time he attempted to center himself, he was met with vivid memories of Sari's laughter, her gentle smile, and the way her eyes sparkled like the stars on a clear night. The scent of jasmine that clung to her dress, the warmth of her presence during their brief encounters, all of it rushed back to him, overwhelming his senses. He felt as if he were standing on the precipice of a great chasm, teetering between his spiritual aspirations and the intoxicating allure of love. The teachings of the Buddha echoed in his mind, urging him to let go of attachments, to embrace the transitory nature of life. But how could he let go of someone who had come to mean so much to him in such a short time? Sari was not just a fleeting fancy. She represented a world he had scarcely allowed himself to imagine. A world filled with laughter, joy, and love. With each passing moment, Arian wrestled with the growing realization that he was not merely attracted to her. He was profoundly in love. This revelation sent shivers down his spine, awakening a deep sense of longing and fear that he had never anticipated. As the retreat progressed, Arian found himself increasingly alienated from the other monks. Their serene expressions and focused minds only served to highlight his own turmoil. He would catch glimpses of their dedication, their unwavering commitment to the path of enlightenment, and he felt a pang of envy mixed with guilt. How could he claim to pursue such a noble path when his heart was so entangled in worldly desires? He often stole glances at the serene face of the abbot, who sat at the front of the hall, radiating calmness. Arian wished he could attain such peace, but each time he closed his eyes, Sari's image emerged, vibrant and alive, rendering his meditative efforts futile. The final day of the retreat arrived, and the monks gathered for a closing ceremony, but Arian could hardly pay attention. He felt as if he were drifting between two worlds, the sacred and the profane. With each chant and mantra, he envisioned Sari praying in the temple, her hands clasped in devotion, her spirit shining brightly as she connected with something greater than herself. It was a beautiful sight, yet it served only to deepen his despair. He longed to share this journey with her, to walk beside her in faith and love. But the reality of his situation loomed like a dark cloud. When the retreat concluded, Arian felt a surge of urgency coursing through him. He could no longer remain in this state of turmoil. He needed to see Sari, to express the feelings that had blossomed within him like a lotus emerging from muddy waters. As he made his way back to the village, his heart raced with anticipation, mingled with a growing anxiety. What if she didn't feel the same? What if he had misread the signs, the fleeting glances, and the shared laughter? These thoughts gnawed at him, yet he pressed on, driven by a force greater than his fears. Upon reaching the village, Arian hurried to Sari's home, the familiar path winding through lush greenery that seemed to echo his inner tumult. Each step felt heavy with the weight of unspoken words, and as he approached her dwelling, his heart pounded louder than ever. He could envision her there, perhaps preparing for her daily prayers, surrounded by the fragrant offerings of flowers and incense. His mind raced with possibilities, each one more hopeful than the last. Would she welcome him with open arms? Would she reciprocate the love he had come to cherish? However, when Arian arrived, he was met not with the warmth of Sari's embrace, but with the cool, indifferent gaze of one of her friends. The friend, a young woman with sharp features and an air of knowing, stood at the entrance, her expression betraying nothing. Arian felt his heart sink as he inquired about Sari, his voice trembling with anticipation. The friend's response, however, shattered his hopes like fragile glass. Sari was engaged, she explained, to a wealthy suitor selected by her family, a union steeped in tradition and expectation. Arian's world tilted on its axis, the ground beneath him giving way to a chasm of despair. The words echoed in his mind, each syllable amplifying the sense of loss that enveloped him. He had come to confess his love, to bare his soul, only to discover that Sari was bound by duty to another. In that moment, the vibrant colors of his dreams dulled to a muted gray, and the warmth of love turned to a chilling void. The friend's gaze softened for a brief moment, but Arian could see the unyielding reality in her eyes. She spoke of Sari's sense of obligation, of her family's wishes, and how she had always been the dutiful daughter. It seemed that Sari's life had been mapped out for her long before Arian had ever entered the picture. As the friend spoke, Arian felt the walls of his heart closing in, constricting around the painful truth that he had no place in Sari's life. All the moments they had shared now felt like cruel illusions, taunting him with what could have been. As he walked away from Sari's home, Arian felt as if he were moving through a fog, each step heavy with sorrow. The vibrant village that had once been filled with promise now felt bleak and lifeless. He He had ventured into this quest for love with hope, only to find himself standing at the edge of despair. He recalled the teachings of detachment, of letting go of worldly desires, but the pain of losing Sari weighed heavily on his heart. The temple, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. He could no longer bear the thought of returning to the quiet halls where he had poured his heart into meditation, only to face the shadows of his unfulfilled longing. Arian felt a deep urge to withdraw, to escape the reminders of Sari and the life he could never have. The thought of returning to his brothers in the monastic order filled him with dread, knowing that he would have to wear the mask of a devoted monk while concealing the turmoil within. In the following days, Arian conducted his duties at the temple with a sense of detachment. The chants felt hollow, the rituals empty, and the teachings he had once cherished now seemed like distant echoes of a life he no longer understood. He withdrew into himself, seeking solace in the shadows, where he could hide from the world and the pain of unrequited love. Each moment spent in the temple felt like a reminder of what he had lost, and he began to question everything he had once believed in. The path of enlightenment that he had chosen felt treacherous and lonely, and Arian found himself grappling with the reality of his situation. His heart ached for Sari, for the life they could have shared, but the chains of duty and societal expectation bound her to another. He was left with a profound sense of loss, a grief that seeped into every corner of his being. As he sat in meditation, he could no longer find the stillness he once cherished. It was overshadowed by thoughts of Sari, of what might have been, and the bitter taste of longing that lingered in his heart. In those quiet, contemplative moments, Arian understood that his journey was far from over. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, and he could feel the winds of change stirring around him. With Sari's engagement looming over him like a dark cloud, he knew he stood at a crossroads, faced with the choice of clinging to the past or forging a new path forward. The heartache was immense, yet he clung to the hope that perhaps, in time, he could find a way to reconcile his love for Sari with the calling of his heart, a calling that still whispered the promise of peace, love, and a deeper understanding of life itself. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the village as Arian wandered through the narrow, winding streets. The familiar scents of incense and fried bananas wafted through the air, mingling with the sounds of chatter and laughter from the market nearby. Yet, despite the vibrant surroundings, Arian felt an overwhelming heaviness in his heart. Each step seemed to echo the turmoil within him, a painful reminder of the love he yearned for but could not claim. He had spent the last few days in a haze, the warmth of the temple now feeling like a distant memory. The tranquil chants of the monks, once a source of comfort, now rang hollow in his ears. Arian sought solace in meditation, seeking to quiet the storm of emotions that raged inside him, but the peace eluded him. Instead, he found himself trapped in a cycle of longing and regret. Sari's laughter, her gentle smile, haunted him relentlessly. As he made his way to a small clearing by the river, he settled on a smooth stone, the water gently lapping at the banks nearby. The rhythmic sound was soothing, yet it only served as a backdrop to his inner conflict. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply and attempting to focus on the present moment. The fragrance of blooming frangipani surrounded him, a stark contrast to the bitterness he felt within. He tried to visualize his path forward, the disciplined life of a monk filled with meditation and service to others. But all he could see was Sari's face, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears as she spoke of duty, her words echoing in his mind. Time slipped away as Arian sat in silence, lost in thought. He recalled their last encounter, the way Sari had looked at him with a mixture of sadness and understanding. She had spoken of her engagement, of the expectations placed upon her by her family, and how she felt obliged to comply despite her heart's desire. He remembered the weight of her words, the way they wrapped around him like chains, binding him to a reality he could not change. The very essence of her struggle resonated with him. He understood the conflict that lay within her, just as he faced his own. The sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the ground, and Arian felt the chill of dusk settle in. He stood up, brushing off the dirt from his robe, and began to walk back toward the temple. Each step felt heavier than the last, burdened by the knowledge that he might never see Sari in the way he wished. The temple, once a sanctuary, now loomed before him like a prison. He entered quietly, the low hum of the monks' prayers echoing in the hall. Arian made his way to the meditation room, hoping to find refuge in the familiar surroundings. Inside, the air was thick with incense, the flickering candlelight casting a warm glow on the wooden walls. He settled onto his mat, attempting to center himself, but the images of Sari flooded his mind once more. He could see her kneeling at the altar, the way her hands clasped in prayer, her lips moving in silent devotion. He had always admired her strength, her unwavering faith, but now he felt a deep sense of helplessness. He wished he could be the one to offer her solace, the one to help her navigate the path she was forced to walk. As the evening wore on, Arian's thoughts shifted from despair to determination. He realized he could no longer hide from his feelings. He needed to confront the reality of his emotions, to speak to Sari once more and understand the depth of her struggle. With each breath, he resolved that he would reach out to her, not just as a man in love, but as a friend who cared deeply for her well-being. The following day, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the temple grounds. Arian spent the morning in contemplation, preparing himself for what he would say to Sari. He practiced his words in the quiet corners of the temple, each phrase carefully chosen to convey his thoughts without overwhelming her. He understood the gravity of her situation. He did not want to add to her burdens, but rather to provide a safe space where she could express her feelings. As afternoon approached, Arian found himself pacing back and forth, anxiety twisting in his stomach. Every moment seemed to stretch into eternity as he waited for Sari to arrive. Finally, he spotted her walking toward the temple, her figure framed by the lush greenery surrounding the path. His heart raced, and he felt a mix of hope and dread. She entered the temple, her presence radiating warmth, but Arian noticed the shadows beneath her eyes, the signs of her inner turmoil. He approached her, and they found a quiet corner away from the prayers and rituals of the temple. As they sat together, Arian's heart pounded in his chest. He took a moment to gather his thoughts, to let the silence envelop them before breaking it. He spoke of his concern for her, of the unease he felt knowing she was trapped in a life she did not choose. Sari listened intently, her expression a mixture of appreciation and sorrow. When Arian finally confessed the depth of his feelings for her, he watched as Sari's face transformed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze for a moment, as if the weight of her reality pressed heavily upon her. Arian could see the conflict etched on her face, the struggle between her heart and her obligations. She explained her engagement, revealing the truth behind her family's expectations. Duty, she said, was a heavy mantle, one that she felt she could not shake off, regardless of her feelings. As she spoke, Arian felt his heart constrict. He wished he could take away her pain, to offer her a different path, one where love and duty could coexist harmoniously. But he understood that he was not the one to make that choice for her. He listened as she shared her fears, her dreams of a life filled with love and laughter, and the haunting reality of the path laid out before her. It became evident to Arian that her engagement was a prison, forged by societal expectations and familial obligations. When they finally parted ways, Arian felt a deep sense of loss. He respected Sari's decision, her need to honor her family, but it left a gaping hole within him. He watched her walk away, the distance between them growing with each step, and he felt the weight of his own heartache. In that moment, a profound realization washed over him. He could not live in a world where love was sacrificed at the altar of duty. As dusk settled over the temple, Arian made his way to his quarters, the conflict within him simmering to a boil. He felt an urgency to find his true path, to seek fulfillment beyond the confines of monastic life if it meant losing Sari forever. His heart ached with the knowledge that love, while beautiful, could also be a source of immense pain. But in that pain lay the seeds of growth, the possibility of forging a new identity, one that embraced both his spirituality and his capacity to love deeply. With the night enveloping the temple, Arian sat in silence, contemplating the choices that lay ahead. He knew he could not remain in a place that felt increasingly suffocating. As he closed his eyes, he envisioned a life where he could honor his spiritual beliefs while allowing his heart to guide him. The path was uncertain, but he felt a flicker of hope igniting within him, a promise of new beginnings and the courage to follow his heart, wherever it might lead. Days passed since Arian's heart had been irrevocably altered by the revelation of Sari's engagement. The serene temple grounds, once a sanctuary filled with tranquility, now felt like a cage to him. He wandered through the lush gardens, his mind a tempest of emotions. The vibrant colors of the flowers seemed muted, the melodic chirping of birds transformed into a haunting echo of his own turmoil. The weight of his unrequited love pressed heavily upon him, and his meditative practice, once a source of solace, had become a battleground where his heart and mind clashed. It was during one of these aimless wanderings that Arian stumbled upon a group of villagers discussing Sari's situation. Their hushed tones carried the gravity of her plight, and as Arian drew closer, he felt a knot of dread tighten in his chest. The words "abusive fiancé" struck him like a bolt of lightning. The realization that Sari was trapped in a situation far worse than he had imagined ignited a fierce determination within him. He could not stand idly by, knowing that the woman who had captured his heart was suffering, her spirit being crushed under the weight of a cruel fate. That evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting an orange glow over the temple, Arian found Sari sitting on the steps outside. The soft light highlighted her features, but her eyes were clouded with worry. He approached her cautiously, the air thick with unspoken words. As she noticed him, a flicker of relief crossed her face, quickly followed by a shadow of apprehension. Arian could see the conflict within her. She was torn between duty and desire, trapped in a web of expectations that suffocated her. Without preamble, he took a seat beside her, the silence stretching between them like a chasm filled with unvoiced fears. Arian's heart raced as he gathered his thoughts, the urgency of the moment propelling him to speak. He shared what he had overheard, his voice steady despite the tremor of anxiety coursing through him. Sari's gasp was almost imperceptible, but he felt the tremor in her body. The weight of her predicament hung heavy in the air, each word he spoke wrapping around them like a vine, threatening to ensnare them both. As he spoke, Arian's resolve deepened. He urged her to consider the possibility of freedom, to envision a life where she could choose her own path, unshackled from the chains of obligation. Sari listened, her gaze drifting to the ground, the flickering shadows of the temple dancing in the fading light. The conflict within her was palpable. Arian could see the flicker of hope igniting in her eyes, battling against the fear that had taken root in her heart. Then, in a moment that shifted the very air between them, Sari revealed her own thoughts. She had been contemplating running away, a whisper of rebellion against the oppressive circumstances that bound her. This revelation ignited a fire within Arian, a spark of courage that illuminated the darkness surrounding them. They spoke of plans, of escape, weaving a tapestry of dreams that intertwined their fates. Each word they exchanged was a thread, binding them closer together, a promise of a future unencumbered by the past. As they crafted their escape plan, Arian felt a sense of clarity wash over him. He would not only advocate for Sari's freedom, but would also stand beside her, facing whatever challenges lay ahead. They strategized in hushed tones, the night wrapping around them like a protective cloak. Arian could feel the weight of the world beginning to lift from Sari's shoulders as hope blossomed anew. Together, they envisioned a life where love triumphed over fear, where they would forge their own destinies free from the constraints of societal expectations. The night deepened, stars flickering above like distant lanterns guiding their path. They spoke of logistics, of timing, and of finding a safe place to go. Arian's heart raced at the thought of holding Sari's hand as they ventured into the unknown. Every detail they discussed wove them tighter together, their fates intertwined in a way that felt almost sacred. The bond they shared, forged in the crucible of adversity, was stronger than the chains that sought to bind them. As dawn broke, Arian felt a sense of urgency. Their plan was set in motion, and the weight of the moment pressed heavily upon him. He knew that confronting Sari's fiancé would be fraught with danger, but the fire within him burned bright. He could not allow Sari to remain trapped in a life of fear. The thought of her suffering at the hands of her fiancé was too much to bear. That day, they executed their plan. Arian's heart pounded in his chest as they approached the fiancé's home, the air thick with tension. Sari's hand trembled in his, a silent reminder of the risks they were taking. As they neared the entrance, Arian steeled himself for the confrontation that awaited them. He could feel the energy shift around them, a palpable tension that crackled in the air. When the door swung open, Arian was met with the dark presence of Sari's fiancé. The man's gaze was sharp, filled with a mixture of surprise and ire as he took in the sight of Sari standing beside Arian. In that moment, Arian felt an overwhelming surge of protectiveness. He stepped forward, the determination coursing through him like a river, ready to defend Sari against the storm that threatened to engulf them. The confrontation unfolded with an intensity that left no room for hesitation. Arian stood firm, his heart racing as he asserted their right to choose their own paths. Sari's fiancé, taken aback by Arian's boldness, reacted with anger, his words laced with venom. But Arian stood his ground, unyielding in his conviction. He spoke of love, of freedom, and of the strength that comes from following one's heart, each word a shield against the darkness that loomed. The tension escalated, and in that moment of fury, the truth of the fiancé's nature was laid bare. Arian's unwavering stance exposed the man's cruel intentions, and the confrontation reached a boiling point. The commotion drew the attention of nearby villagers, and soon, the weight of justice began to tip in their favor. The fiancé's threats turned to despair as the community rallied, casting a spotlight on his abusive behavior. In the end, the fiancé was taken away, his cruel grip on Sari's life shattered. Arian and Sari stood together, their hearts beating in unison, liberated from the chains of fear. As the village gathered around them, a sense of hope blossomed in the air. They embraced, feeling the warmth of their love envelop them like a protective cocoon. The world outside may have been fraught with challenges, but in that moment, they were united by their courage and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Together, they faced the dawn of a new beginning, their hearts intertwined as they stepped into a world filled with possibilities. No longer bound by duty or fear, Arian and Sari were free to explore the depths of their love, hand in hand, ready to forge their own destiny. In the face of adversity, they had discovered the true power of love, a force that could conquer even the darkest of circumstances. The journey ahead would be theirs to shape, a testament to their unwavering devotion and the enduring strength of the human spirit.